You can't say the Democratic Party didn't earn it. Didn't earn the head of the Hispanic caucus losing like this. Mind you, Darliza is about to become one of the biggest political figures. She's going to be a bigger political figure than Valdez. And I'm not saying that because Valdez seems the more competent of the two as like a political operator, if you were to ask my opinion. But dethroning the head of the Hispanic caucus, dethroning such a high-profile congressman from his seat in such nail-biting fashion after so much high-profile attention against it, and with so many, let's just say, regrettable statements in her past becoming news. But in this attention cycle, attention is attention. Both for that reason that the right is going to think she's perfect to lampoon, both because there's going to be liberals who are going to find her positions detestable, whether it be because of their nature on socialism or whether it be because of some of their hypocrisies, like her stance on Ukraine. That's going to get her a certain amount of anger. In the DSA circles, they're going to love her because to them, this is another Joe Crowley moment. When AOC took out the third most highest ranking Democrat in the Democratic Party, Joe Crowley, and knocked him off of his House seat, that sent shockwaves throughout the entire Democratic establishment. I remember being at a different, it was for some local Maryland DNC, like Central Committee position. It was like I was at a party to, for those results. And
Black-pilled Kiwi has donated $5. Do you think this current admin has chased lots of leftists? Places like NY, and that's what's causing these wins?
Have chased lots of leftists? I think that after 2 terms of Trump, after the Democrats sent the appeal of a return to normalcy, that which never came, some people came to the conclusion, well, okay, if we can't return to normalcy, we have to go somewhere. We have to live somewhere. We're not going to live in MAGA world forever. And I mean, and they don't feel particularly inspired by the pathway forward given by Chuck Schumer. Thank you for the $5. So I do think it is part of the Democrats' failure to stop a second Trump term. Part of it is this feeling that they need fighters, and these people are engaging in not only the most aggressive rhetoric, but also a lot of times the most aggressive like policy platforms, and they're coming from organizations that definitely have a different image than the Democratic Party. DSA right now polls very well amongst the Democratic Party. In fact, Democratic Socialists of America, according to recent polling, polls better amongst the Democratic Party than the leadership of the Democratic Party. And what is this incumbent part of? Democratic Party leadership as the head of the Hispanic caucus. Crowley was supposed to be Pelosi's successor. Yeah, which is why when I was at that Democratic Central Committee election night party, watching on TV, we were losing the election. We lost that election, right? We lost that. But the room was electric anyway, because they knew that Joe Crowley getting knocked out was not only unlikely, but it felt next to impossible, but they did it anyway. They did it anyway. And it sent a message to the rest of the Democratic establishment. And I think that feeling of jubilance, of a message being sent to the Democratic establishment, of a movement feeling like it's being built, I think that second part might be bigger here, as you have 2 DSA candidates, Brandlander, Mondami in the Oval, not in the Oval Office, in the big house in New York. I think that will feel more movement spanning than maybe even the initial squad, or at least localized to New York. As New York becomes, like, I guess, the leading example for DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, like, electeds. But it also has to become an example on policy and achieving things. And Mondami's not even a year in yet, so we'll have to wait and see for that, because there's a certain honeymoon period that I think he is still in. There's messaging that he does that is certainly helping him. He's fantastic at messaging. There's some like local initiatives which seem to have some success, but after a year, after 2 years, after 3 years, we will see. Because you have to deliver, and you have to deliver with no support from the federal government. And doing that in a city like New York is going to be very difficult. We're at 82%. We're now up another 3%. And the lead that Chevalier has is 2,000. Just under 2,000 votes. Actually, that means that the lead has shrunken. The lead has shrunken slightly. But it's still large enough that I believe that she's going to take this. But you're getting socialists on the other side of the state as well. What? You mean in New York, or do you mean in California? What do you mean? Yeah, by the way, this is a huge show of strength for Mondami, by the way. His endorsement might literally, if it wasn't for his endorsement, Chevalier would have lost. This is a huge show of Mondami's political power too, and we need to view it in that spectrum as well. That if it wasn't for Mondami's endorsement, Valdez would have still won. Her machine was very, very, very ground game focused, and it got a lot of success on that. But Chevalier probably would have lost if it wasn't for that endorsement. Which also means that Mondami has to claim him. So I mean, I don't know if Valdez or her will end up being a problem for Mondami down the line, but that's something you're also going to have to think about. That because of their unique political situation, because of their unique stance, because they're going to be seen as making a political earthquake, because they are Democratic Socialists of America, they're going to get that extra attention. And man, you better hope they use it well. I think we're gonna, I mean, we're at 83% of the vote counted now, and I see Valdez is at 88. I think we'll have the results for the election tonight. And she just grew her lead to 3.5. It's over, man. I'm calling it. It's done. She won. Man, what does this mean? Well, number one, it means Mondami's got real political staying power. Real political staying power. Without his endorsement, I think she would have lost. I stand by that. I think that his endorsement carried a lot of weight. It really moved a lot of people to pay attention to the race and to get behind her in the last moment. And I don't know if she would have been able to get over the top. Valdez, her victory was so overwhelming that I think that even without Mondami's endorsement, Valdez probably would have won. But Mondami has really showed his staying power, really shown his strength here. That's the first thing. Number two, this is a huge victory for not only DSA, globally, nationally, but more importantly, probably DSA locally, like New York DSA specifically, as there are different chapters. And while I get different reviews for how DSA New York is in comparison to the national chapter, I have been told that it is better. That's what I've been told. I cannot confirm it, but that's what I've been told. Either way, New York DSA, and these are I don't even want to get into the Ukraine stuff right now. We'll get into that at the end. But that's a big victory for New York DSA. So obviously that's big for them. Next, this is a huge wounding for the Democratic Party, at least for the Democratic Party leadership. Losing someone like this isn't exactly like losing Joe Crowley, but it's as close as you can get to an AOC Joe Crowley moment. He wasn't going to replace Nancy Pelosi, but this guy was the leader of the Hispanic caucus. He's been in this seat for over 5 terms, and he is quite influential. And he was able to pull upon a lot of resources towards this end, right at the end of the gate, in order to, keep himself competitive. But they were able to beat him anyway. And I think if you're Chuck Schumer right now, and you're thinking about an election 2.5 years down the road, that's probably not his first immediate thought. Definitely thinking about it tonight. But you're thinking about that election. How could you even begin to shore up your defenses for an AOC challenge from the left? If Chuck Schumer wanted to stay in Democratic leadership, which honestly, I do not think he should past 2028. I think that is the year Chuck Schumer rides off into the sunset, which I think that's perfectly fine. That's when Trump's leaving office. Chuck Schumer can be like, I landed longer than everyone. I lasted longer than Joe Crowley. I lasted longer than Nancy Pelosi. I lasted longer than all these people, and I stayed just to the end of Donald Trump's time in office. Honestly, it gives him a pretty decent out. But if you're Chuck Schumer, I don't know how you consider anything else but that out right now. Because I think if AOC wants that Senate seat, she should get it. And you want to know what? I think that would be a lot more politically efficacious for AOC to run for that Senate seat in 2028 than run for president in 2028, likely lose her seat in the House, and then, have to run again in 2 years and, have to start rebuilding. When you could get into this United States Senate, get some important committee positions, and continue to build the influence of the progressive movement within the Democratic Party. So that's another conclusion I have. Another conclusion I have is this is an attention economy. Like, a lot of the attention that Darliza got at the end was bad, but it was also attention that she needed in order to clear the gap with a well-known 5-term incumbent. And so while I'm sure some of that attention poisoned people against her.
I heard a streamer say that supporting a Republican presidential candidate that is antagonistic against Israel would be better than a Democratic candidate that's sympathetic towards Israel. Thoughts?
Sorry, I was in the middle of a sentence, but okay, we'll respond to that. Thank you for the $10. I heard a streamer say that supporting a Republican presidential candidate that is antagonistic against Israel would be better than a Democratic candidate that's sympathetic towards Israel. Thoughts? I mean, I guess it depends upon how that antagonism and sympathy develops, how it manifests, and it does depend on the rest of their agenda. I mean, like, there is no one issue that is the most important issue. Sorry. Like, I don't think that's the case with Ukraine necessarily. I don't think that's the case with Palestine. I don't think that's the case necessarily healthcare. I think it's just whatever matters most to you. And so if that matters most to you more than Ukraine, more than every other foreign policy issue, more than all of the other things the Democrat would be better on, then yes, I guess it would make sense. Schumer, yeah, Schumer will get yeeted. If AOC wants a position, she has it. But that's not to say that the DSA can take over the entire Democratic Party. Let's understand. These are blue districts. You win in a blue district, that doesn't mean you can win everywhere. Like, Richie Torres won in New York as well, and that's still New York in a blue district. So it can depend on which borough you're in. Borough you're in. It could depend whether you're in, like, the heart of the urban center, or you're actually gonna have some more suburbs included in your neighborhood. It could depend on your candidate's political longevity in the neighborhood, whether they're a carpetbagger or not, as the case with Kat was the case, and is the case right now with possibly might end up being the case for Debbie Wasserman Schultz. There's, like, all these different factors that come into play. So I don't think it's as simple as translating this to the whole country. No. But I do think that this does say a tune that much of the Democratic Party is humming right now, and that the progressive faction of the Democratic Party by the end of 2028 will probably be continuing to grow in size. The progressives as we know them, your Ilhan Omars, your AOCs, your Rashida Tlaibs, your Cori Bushes, which we'll see if she gets back in office or not, your Chevaliers, your Valdezes, your Amandamis, you're all of these people. You're going to have more of those types of figures in office. Summer Lee, maybe, include her in that. But does that mean you can win in all areas of, say, Pennsylvania, Maryland, California? No. It means you can win here. And it means that New York DSA has been able to build up enough roots in this specific neighborhood. DSA has 100,000 members in the country. It has a lot of work to still do, but this does show DSA in the best position it has probably ever been since its creation. You know what this means, right? If there was a vote, this does mean that if there was a vote on the Support Ukraine Act with all these people, that'd be 3 Democratic votes against it. Ilhan's, because of sanctions, and then these two, because they're against aid. They think that you end the war by drum circle or some shit. Okay, but this is something that has to be dealt with between now and when they get inaugurated and they can start having votes on this legislation. Like, they have to answer questions of how they're going to vote on Ukraine aid that are more direct. Because currently, this nominee won't even answer questions about Ukraine. The idea that there's a Democratic nominee for office that won't answer questions about Ukraine directly and instead is like engages in like fucking like a word essay, like it sounds like they're just trying to meet like a character limit in order to try to get around giving a direct answer. That's not good. And it indicates to me that they wanted to get through the primary without like sharing their opinion of, I don't know, we're not going to send shit, fuck them. Like maybe not really fuck them in spirit, but fuck them in actuality. That's why we have whips, yet we lost Ilhan. And the idea that the whip will necessarily just, once it becomes one vote, it can easily become two. And once it becomes 2 votes, it even more easily becomes 3, becomes 4, becomes 5. That's just how it works. Once you're the only person in the party standing against the grain, nobody wants to stand with you in that situation. But once it becomes 3 people, the reaction, the anger, the outrage, and the idea of abandoning the Ukrainian people, it dissipates across 3 people instead of concentrating against one person. And if Ilhan can sign the discharge petition, but then vote against the bill, if these people have a position that is not as strong as Ilhan's, then it's easy for me to see them voting against any bill in its entirety. What's the ask for support from her, actually? If we were to ask these people, it would be, would you vote in favor of the Support Ukraine Act, the Ukraine Support Act, if the Russians continue not to engage in good faith and agree to an end to the war? What's the plan if the Russians continue to attack? Like, that shouldn't be the plan should be support them until we can get peace. Like, that's the easy answer. That's the easy answer. It's support them until we get peace. 6 words. 6 words. Now the question would be, how do you support? And you would say, you support them with whatever is necessary to stop Russia from taking over Ukraine. You could say something like that, any number of phrasing it so you don't have to get into specifics of what specific, but something, anything that would indicate a clear position on this instead of Ukraine, war, bad, like it's slam poetry session. It leaves my skin crawling. Okay, with that, with 86% of the vote counted, with her 3.3 votes up, we can say at this point that she's won. Valdez won. DSA sweep. Lasher looks like he's gonna win. He's gonna beat Alex, just barely. Makes you question why we had the Kennedy in the race in the first place. Yeah, that's about it.
A curd is a curd.